Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cyber Conversations. It's been a while since we did any. So today we're starting back up again with a very special guest. I'm Kanti, and today I have with me Alethe Denis. She is a skilled physical penetration tester with advanced tactics in social engineering and human psychology. She's very passionate about delivering excellence and holds herself to an extremely high standard while ensuring her team's safety, ethics, and the rules of engagement are always at the top of our mind. She is currently a senior security consultant on the Red Team at Bishop Fox, an offensive cybersecurity company that helps clients protect their assets and data. She held the Certified Ethical Hacker certification and has multiple awards and publications in the field of social engineering and cybersecurity. If you are familiar with DEF CON, then you may be interested in knowing the next part of her journey. While pursuing her passion for hacking, she joined the cybersecurity industry after winning the prestigious DEF CON Social Engineering Capture the Flag competition in 2019 and receiving a coveted spot in DEF CON Black Badge Hall of Fame. Since then, she has been a leading social engineering expert and cybersecurity ally for companies around the globe. Thank you so much for joining us, Alethe. You have the floor. I know you have slides to share, so you have the floor.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, perfect. So we're going to get right into today's talk. I'm going to talk about my journey into cybersecurity, as well as how you can build skills to join the industry. So let's hop right into a career path in cybersecurity with me, your host, Alethe Denis. So my name is Alethe, and I'm probably most well known for securing a place in the Black Badge Hall of Fame at DEF CON. But I've also been featured in some media outlets, as well as a feature on the Darknet Diaries podcast. And that podcast has led to some incredible opportunities, including an opportunity to train U.S. Army Special Operations personnel and contractors at the fort, soon to be known again as Fort Bragg. I've also had an opportunity most recently to go to Los Alamos National Laboratory and present a lecture to students, including some stories about some recent physical pen tests, and to tour the facility. Although, despite many sets of paperwork and about 6 months of planning, they did not let me pet the nukes. Today on our agenda, we're going to talk about what is cybersecurity. We'll do an overview of that, as well as what is a hacker in the context of cybersecurity, how I ended up here, what I actually do on a daily basis, and then we're going to hold some time for questions as well. So first up, what is cybersecurity? Our new world of information is pretty insane. We have people creating a lot of data and transacting or sharing that data across the internet and across networks in our companies and organizations all over the world on a daily basis at volumes that are staggering. And what cybersecurity is in charge of is essentially protecting the people and the data that are within our organizations. And to do that, we have two main teams of people that are in charge of protecting that data, which we generally refer to as defenders or the blue team. And then there are people who help to test or validate that all of the defensive and security tools are working properly and that the blue team can rely on those things to work and function as expected. Those people are generally referred to as the attackers, colloquially as hackers or the red team. And so these two functions work together to help to protect the data that is being shared inside of the company and with vendors, clients, partners, and external parties outside of these companies. So what type of skills and capabilities do we need to work in information security? Above all, problem-solving skills, critical thinking, an aptitude for technology, for computers, for working with technology, cloud computing, ways that software and applications work together with computers that are both, inside of a building and systems that are located, quote, in the cloud or just in another building that's somewhere else, and how those things are connected together through computer networks. Knowledge of security and best practices, how to keep information safe and secure, and how to connect systems, software, and data in a way that is secure. So just because something works and it's connected doesn't necessarily mean that we're sharing those things in a secure way. And so we need to have a very big sense of attention to detail to make sure that we're sharing things in a way that is both secure and safe, and that we're protecting this data and the people that are connected to it. Because this data can include things like personal identifiable information, things about people like their social security numbers and addresses, names, private information, but it can also include things about the company and about investments and money and things that are very proprietary to the company, how they make their products, and things that, if leaked, could cause big problems for that company. You also need to have a desire to learn, because this is not the type of industry where you can just go to school, get a degree, and then stop learning because you know everything there is to know. Things are changing constantly, and you need to keep ahead of what new threats are and new vulnerabilities that may exist. The one thing that I can't overstate enough is the need for excellent communication skills, because you will be communicating your findings, what you've learned, what you're seeing, and conveying your need for more resources or the critical nature of a vulnerability that you found, or the risk that you're observing to people both on your team and people above you, or potentially to clients if you're working in consulting. And you need to have excellent writing skills, excellent speaking skills, and also very professional and polished presentation skills. So what is a hacker? To help us demonstrate that, I've brought a couple of friends that you may recognize, and they're on loan from Disney with their permission for educational purposes only. But I have Nick and Judy here to sort of illustrate who the red team and the blue team are and how they work together. So for example, I work for a company called Bishop Fox. Bishop Fox is an offensive security testing company, which means all we do is simulate attacking. And we are hired by clients, represented here by the blue team. And those clients, they can be large companies, small companies, but for the most part, the companies that hire Bishop Fox are big companies that you'd probably recognize the name of. And they hire Bishop Fox to come in and they test the security for that company. And in a lot of cases, we do regular pen testing where we come in and we test applications and software and computer networks. And we have very regimented processes that we follow to complete those pen tests. And in other cases, we do what's called a red team engagement, where we have a trophy or a goal that's set at the beginning of the engagement. And it's the job of the red team to go in the shortest, most efficient route to reach that goal. And so when the red team tests something, we don't necessarily test to see where all the holes in the fence are, but we try to find the most efficient hole to get through to compromise whatever system it is that we're testing, and then to reach that trophy objective or that goal to reach one network or one system within the company. So in this case, we have the blue team represented by Judy protecting the company, and they're looking to see when the red team gets over this wall or gets through a hole in the wall. And we have the red team that is acting as an attacker, and they have a signed agreement that gives them permission to perpetrate this attack. So they have permission and a signed contract that says it's okay for them to do this. And they try to emulate a real attack to give the blue team an opportunity to test all of their tools, all their monitoring, all their alerting to see if the security software is working properly and if the team is ready to respond to a real threat in the way that they anticipate that they should be. And so it's the blue team's job to try to catch the red team, and it's the red team's job to make the blue team look good, essentially. And if the red team is able to get through that wall and compromise the client, then it's the red team's job to help the blue team discover where those holes in the wall were, describe in very great detail how they were able to compromise the company, and then help give recommendations to the blue team about how they can fix those gaps. So during the test, the red team will set up the test and try to sneak past all of the defenses that the blue team has put in place. And it's the goal of the red team to get in, achieve their objective, and then get out without being detected. And it's the goal of the blue team to block them and detect them, know that they're there, and stop them from completing their objective. So the blue team is responsible for keeping everything in the company safe. And they're also attempting to make sure that they can see anything that looks like it's not supposed to be there on the network and within the company's, basically inside of the perimeter of the company. So inside of that boundary or that fence, digital fence. So when these two teams are sparring, one is pretending to be an attacker and the other is acting as though it's a real incident so that they can practice and make sure that when there is a real incident, that they are ready to respond to it. What happens after the test is that the red team will write up a report. This report is usually pretty lengthy, and if the red team observes anything that could potentially be a vulnerability in the client's network or in any of their defenses, the red team will write that up into the report and provide a recommendation for how the client or the blue team can fix that. And they issue that report, they go over it with the client, make sure that they understand how to fix any gaps that the red team discovered, and then they will help coach the blue team through remediating or resolving those problems and essentially patching the holes in that fence. So how on earth did I end up here? This route that I took into cybersecurity is not really the most traditional of routes. And the short answer is that I did many different jobs in many different industries, though I did start with a degree in chemical and molecular sciences with a minor in computer science and going to university. I ended up taking several different jobs in a variety of different industries, including insurance and telecommunications and a variety of other things, including marketing. And I worked for a startup that was a competitor to a popular photo sharing app before it was purchased by a mega huge social media company. And through all of these different jobs, I acquired a bunch of different skills. And these skills were, inclusive of things like audit and compliance and online marketing and sales and research and data. And what they all turned into were things that were transferable skills into cybersecurity. Audit and compliance skills helped me to do cybersecurity assessments against frameworks. And online marketing and sales skills helped me to do phishing and influence and social engineering. And research and data work helped me to find information online when I was doing reconnaissance for red team engagements. And this job is quite challenging. No two engagements are alike, and every single day is different. So having all of this different experience over the last 20-ish years really helped to give me a unique perspective coming into this industry after several years of working in intelligence and doing consulting for over a decade in a different industry. So how did I make the transition into cybersecurity? I began competing in contests And hacking contests are actually a really wonderful way to break into this industry, but maybe not for the reason that you'd expect. Most people expect that winning a black badge, I had people beating down my door trying to hire me, and that's not exactly the truth. But it did give me a really neat opportunity to network with people, to meet a lot of people in different areas of the industry and begin building human networks that led to job opportunities and meeting the right people to open the right doors and get my foot into my first cybersecurity job in 2020. So I'm relatively new to the industry. I've only been officially working in the industry for about 5 years. So what I would recommend is ensuring that as you're going through school and your education pathway into this industry, that you nurture those relationships and keep those friendships going so that you can keep those human networks healthy, and that uh, network that you create of friendships can help to lead to future job opportunities. So how do you learn the skills that you need for cybersecurity? There's no one size fits all answer. I've talked to many people, including the other members of my red team, and it really just kind of depends. Some people go the more military route. They do military service and then they do schooling and certifications through the military. Some go the more traditional college and university route. They get a degree and then pursue internships or entry-level roles to gain experience. Some do training and certifications online if they're already working full-time and they can't go to college or university. Certifications are an excellent way to gain the education that you need for the um, the oh man, what is the word that I'm looking for? The non-practical theory type education that you want on your resume. Certifications can provide the theoretical knowledge that you need on your resume to get your foot in the door and gain that practical experience with on-the-job training that you can find in internships and apprenticeships. You can also look at internships and entry-level roles to gain experience, and those can be SOC or security operations centers roles, which can offer good entry-level opportunities for folks that want to go directly into security. There's also information security or information technology roles or IT roles that can offer a really good gateway into InfoSec. Working in IT can give you the background and the foundational knowledge to go into security that will make you a far more advanced operator on the red team or pen testing side once you make your way over into security. And you can also combine these things. So you can do the traditional college and university route and then add certifications on top of that and make an even more robust resume for yourself that will help you get beyond the initial resume scanning tools that recruiters use to find more compelling candidates. And you can start studying independently now. There are online and in-person resources that are available now. A lot of them have free levels that you can do to start off with, and some of them are relatively inexpensive with annual subscriptions that you can sign up for to do courses as you have time to do them and progress at your own pace. So then let's talk about what I actually do. So on a daily basis, I am a social engineering focused red teamer. So I'm a behavioral expert. I typically focus on influence and leadership. I don't like to use the words manipulation because they're gross. But essentially, I influence and lead people to do things that they probably shouldn't do, which is gross. But if people follow the procedures and the protocols that they are supposed to within their job and they follow the guidelines of their company, then they cannot fail the test. So if they are sticking to the rules and they follow the right procedure and they politely tell me nope, which is what they're supposed to do, then they can't fail the test and everything will be fine. Um, the other thing that I do use on a daily basis is computer and networking knowledge. I also use technical tools, software, and things like that to do my job, as well as the communication and writing skills that I mentioned before, and physical bypass tools when I do physical penetration testing, which basically means I get paid from time to time to break into buildings. And it's totally fine because our clients want to make sure that not only are their doors and locks working, but that their people who are charged with protecting their buildings are doing their jobs and properly validating the people that they are allowing to access the buildings. And then I also use analysis skills and create recommendations for reporting, like I mentioned, at the end of these engagements, and then present those to clients and talk them through how to fix these things. It's also important to note in our reporting, we always make sure that it's anonymous. We never call out individuals specifically. We always make sure that these things are extremely anonymous and that we look at this from a whole company perspective and we make recommendations for the whole company to improve things, not just from a, do better training type perspective, but we try to make recommendations for technical or physical security controls that can help to prevent us from getting in, so to speak, even if the humans are compelled to look the other way. And then finally, how I help companies protect information and people. I also lead the tabletop exercise facilitation service line at Bishop Fox. It's something that I helped to create from the ground up, and I'm quite proud of what we've put together here and how we facilitate tabletops for our clients using real red team inspired attack scenarios to inform the tabletop scenarios that we develop for our red team tabletops. We also simulate real attacks in our red team engagements and try to make them as compelling, realistic, and currently themed as possible. And I contribute back to the community doing things like this, as well as presenting at conferences and sharing resources online. So you are welcome to connect with me, and you can learn more about my journey into this industry through the Darknet Diaries podcast. That episode 107 goes very heavily into my background and how I got into this industry. The best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn, and I am also on the board for DEF CON groups, and I would very highly recommend reaching out to your local DEF CON group and getting involved there. It's a way to meet people, to network, and to start building those connections that could lead to future employment opportunities, but also that can help you build those skills starting right now. So thank you so much for viewing this presentation and for attending this talk. And I look forward to connecting with you in the future. And that's it from me.
Thank you for sharing your slides. I do have a bunch of questions that I wanted to ask you, and I kept editing them while you were talking. I had more things to add, some things to take off, but that is such a fascinating work that you do in social engineering. I will say it is one of my favorites. When it comes to cyber, I'm not a very technical person. I've always been on the softer side of things, management, people skills, that's my thing. And a few years ago, coincidentally, 2019 is when I did social engineering as part of an internship. And I got to call people and pretend that I was one of their bank's customers to get them to reveal how much money I had in my account. We were two female interns, and we were able to successfully get the information for four people from the bank, and they caught on. So they had this central line where we called. So there's this lady, she kind of recognized our voices after the fourth or fifth time, and she just hung up on us. But
Oh
until
gosh.
then, we were able to successfully get that information, which I thought was so fascinating because when they ask you to verify, all we had to say was, I'm not comfortable sharing my social security with you, like the last four of my social with you over the phone. And they'd verified our date of birth or the client's date of birth and
Hmm.
other things. And they were fine with giving me that information without any extra form of verification or anything at all. And when we gave the results to our supervisor, they were so surprised because they were never able to get through the call center. And we figured, okay, not a lot of people think of women as being the bad guys. They
Yep.
don't consider that. And so it was fascinating. But anyway, sorry about that little detour.
No, not at
Um,
all. I think it's relevant to the conversation because in my role, it's something that I point out rather often that it's my job to highlight the fact that um, our clients' employees often discount the effectiveness of my ability to exploit their unconscious bias.
that is correct.
And if I'm able to overcome the client employee's unconscious bias towards me, the ability to get them to give me a break and to bypass the proper procedure for that company to allow somebody access, then what's preventing an attacker from exploiting that same bias?
Exactly. Exactly. And this is, I will say, a little bit concerning the when you think of it from an attacker standpoint, that they can exploit this bias against the companies and maybe get them to reveal sensitive information. But as a student, as a
Hmm.
paid professional at that point, I thought that was super cool that we were able to get through this system, or we were able to get through the customer service people.
Yeah, I know. And it's interesting too because I'll do interviews and there'll be a write-up in some online magazine and then I'll read the comments, which I know I shouldn't, but I read the comments and somebody will say, "Oh, well, she's only successful because she doesn't look like a pen tester." And I'm like, "What does a pen tester look like? Can you
Exactly.
draw me a
Like,
picture?"
and a lot of people still think of cyber as being, the dark basement, the one in the movies and the TV series that we see, the dark basement, this guy in the hoodie with the hood up and very dark and just clacking away. I think lot of people think that is the reality of being
Hmm.
somebody in cyber, when it's so much more. And one of the goals of cyber conversation is to bring forth that there's no one type of person who can be in cyber. It's for everybody.
Right. Well, and I think more importantly, if attackers know that that's the expectation, doesn't it make sense that they would use someone that looks less threatening to
Yeah,
perpetrate an attack? I've always said that um, it's it's my expectation as someone who emulates attackers that they would choose someone that looks non-threatening to be the person that they send on site to try to gain access to a building. So why doesn't it make sense for me to be the person that's perpetrating a physical pen test?
exactly. And if you think about it, it's like hiding in plain sight.
Hmm.
You send someone that's non-threatening, someone that you don't think could be, the bad guy.
Right. Because at the end of the day, it's my job to validate that the people who work at the company are following the proper process for validating that someone who says, "I am here to do XYZ" is legitimately there for a reason and that they have authorization to be there. And it
That is
shouldn't make a difference what that person looks like or how they present themselves. That process should be followed every time.
that's correct. And while you were talking just now, I also thought of this video I'm sure you've watched it on YouTube. This lady at DEF CON, I think she tries to
Hmm.
use the voice solicitation. And I always show that video to my students, and they're amazed by it. Of course, it was a few years ago. There's more
Hmm.
protocols now, but when I think of social engineering, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, there are going to be people at every company who will, you use our weaknesses, humans' weaknesses against them. Quite literally, that's what we're doing with social engineering is we're trying to appeal to, sometimes their human nature, get them to reveal details. And I always, always show that video to my students.
Yes. So that video, it actually features a woman named Jessica,
Yeah.
and she is incredible. It's one of my favorite videos, and I think it's been stolen and reshared so many times
Yeah.
because it is so compelling to illustrate social engineering and how easily people are manipulated into doing what's easy instead of what's best practice from a security standpoint. But yeah, I adore that demonstration because she does it just so well. And people go, oh, well, that's so easy. It looks so easy. But what people
No,
don't
it's really not.
understand
It's
is
the skill
the
behind
skill
it.
behind it, right? And it's layers of understanding of human behavior and
Yep.
influence and the ability to essentially manipulate someone into focusing on all of the wrong things and then having
Yeah,
that emotional response
exactly.
instead of thinking about something
A logical
analytically.
response.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's the crying baby thing that gets
Oh,
me
it
all the
triggers
time.
people.
It really does, because it's not human instinct to want to soothe the crying baby.
Whether it's annoying to the
Yep.
person that you're talking to and they just want to stop hearing it, or it's someone who wants to give the mother, mother in quotes,
Hmm.
an opportunity to go soothe the baby immediately. It's
Exactly.
just, yeah, it's definitely a trigger. So I also want to stress, like when I do engagements, something that I will never do is incorporate something fear-based, blackmail themed, or coercive into a pretext. In fact, most of the pretexts that I use are very seemingly benign, just business process, compliance, sort of mundane, actually.
Hmm.
Um, so most people assume like I would use the crying baby thing, or
Yep.
wear like a prosthetic pregnant belly or
Hmm.
something like that to bypass hospital security, which would work. It would absolutely work. But I actually believe more, and there are like rules of engagement and a scope of work that we are held to a standard when we're operating on physical pen tests, as well as any social engineering on any red team engagement that we agree to in advance of the test. But I'll go even a step beyond that and like not just tie one hand behind my back, but tie the other one too, because I feel like it's more compelling in the reporting if I can show that I was successful without employing any of those like highly manipulative, highly triggering tactics to be successful.
That is amazing. So actually back to the questions, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. Like you've had such a cool and a very non-linear introduction into cybersecurity, and you've talked about your journey, what you do. So what does your typical day at work look like? So you go to the office at 8 a.m. What does your day look like?
So I'm very fortunate in that Bishop Fox is fully distributed, which means that we are all remote. And because we are a consulting company, we can deploy on site to clients depending on what um, area of the business you work in. You may be deployed on site for like a wireless pen test, or you may be deployed on site to a client for a physical pen test. But for the most part, we generally, work from home. I have like office space, that I sort of squat in because I also co-own a phone company. So during the pandemic, my kids came home from school, so I left the house so I could work. So I have the ability to both work from home and from an office that I have downtown, which is kind of nice. So I can kind of be in either place. Right now, I prefer to work from home because it's just prettier outside. But um, generally speaking, most days I'll work from the office, and then with uh, with us, our day can start uh, whenever our client sort of starts their day. So sometimes my client's based on the East Coast. Sometimes my client will be based on the West Coast. And so it just kind of depends on when they start their day as to when I plan to start my day. Sometimes we have international clients, and so I'll be working on Sunday night, which is their Monday morning. It just kind of depends on how things are set up for our testing timeframes. Um, and then for the most part, we're generally speaking salary employees. So we don't have like a fixed schedule, like a 8 to 5 or anything like that. It's more of a, this is your assigned project work. This is the number of hours you have to work for this project, like the expectations of the number of hours you would need to complete this assignment. And then you kind of have the flexibility to work the number of hours that you need to get the work done on any given day, as long as you meet the milestones and the deadlines of that project and have, the field work completed by a certain point and the report completed by a certain point, which is kind of great for me because I'm a little ADHD. So there are some days where, things are firing on all cylinders and some days where I'm heavily distracted. And that's also just kind of consulting in general. There's, days where I have 6 or 8 calls back to back, and then days where there's no calls and I can really sit down and focus heavily on work and writing and that kind of stuff.
Awesome. So you've mentioned a little bit of your work, right? So you've done awesome ethical hacking work as your role, senior security consultant at Bishop Fox. You've created red team tabletop exercises, scored them with, cyber IR resilience scorecard, and even used AI deepfakes for social engineering. So how do these approaches then work together to make the companies more safer, to make your clients and your recommendations? How does that work?
Right. So usually what we'll do is we have an actual red team assessment where we actually try to attack the company using our red team, technically trying to compromise the company and break into it through their external perimeter, or we do an internal network test where they give us, say, a general set of credentials for a normal user profile, and they'll give us a company laptop and say, like, can you go beyond this normal user's profile to get into something more sensitive? It just depends on what the goal or the trophy is for that type of red team engagement. Sometimes for me, they'll be more social engineering focused, or there may be a deep fake element where, for example, I'm working on a project right now where I'm creating a deep fake of a person who works for the company in order to pose as them to try to get people in the finance department to complete a financial transaction without following the proper procedure. What they're supposed to say is, no, I need to hang up and call you back for proper authorization, which I'm guessing they will likely do. But it's my job to see if they will follow that proper procedure. And so once we've completed the test where we actually try to compromise the company, then we can come back later after we've tested this technical blue team and their alerting and monitoring and all these procedures and things, and we can create a tabletop exercise that is themed with the same type of attack path that we took during the red team. And then we can facilitate that tabletop exercise in a hypothetical tabletop scenario for the non-technical incident response team. So executives, marketing people, PR and communications, the legal department, and other people within the company who aren't necessarily doing the technical incident response, blocking attackers actually, but who would be involved in an incident in the non-technical ways that people would be responsible for helping to protect the company. And then we can make sure that they're following the incident response plan and that that incident response plan makes sense for the company. So they step their way through the incident response plan, and then they get an opportunity to analyze whether those steps make sense for the company, if they're tapping the right people at the right times, if they should, release the press release sooner or later, those type of things. And that really helps to create a full picture for the organization of whether or not their incident response plans and procedures make sense, if the technical incident response team is working together well with the non-technical incident response team. And then that company is so much better prepared for a real incident, because I always say you don't want to be reading the fire extinguisher instructions while the building is on fire. The tabletop exercises are really designed to help give confidence to the incident response teams, both technical and non-technical, prior to a real incident. So everybody knows where to go, what to do, how to use the fire extinguisher, and how to work together to get it done.
And that is such a good way to do it as well. I currently teach a class, cyber law and policy, and we go over multiple things. I'm literally yesterday we started incident response because the students need to understand, and they have to do a project. They have to write an incident response plan. I gave them 3 scenarios. They pick one, they write a plan for it. And my insistence has always been your IR plan should not be paragraphs. It
Mhm.
does nobody will have
No,
time in
no.
case of a fire, like you mentioned, in case of a fire, in case of a tornado or hurricane, nobody has the time to sit down and read like 10 paragraphs. You
Yeah.
want them to be action steps. You want them to be items that they can just say, okay, for example, Bob was supposed to be, or Bob is responsible for doing A, B, and C. And you don't want it to be a paragraph, bullet points, tables. So what you just said about the instructions in the fire extinguisher just reminded me of that.
Yeah, yeah. Your policies and then your procedures should be two separate documents.
They should really be 2 separate documents. Um, so then you already mentioned that you do a lot of speaking at conferences, presentations at conferences. What inspired you to start that? And as a
Mhm.
follow-up to that, what are some, or what according to you are some of the hardest and some of the easiest parts of public speaking, especially in the cybersecurity field?
Right. So when I first started doing public speaking, it was something that I wanted to share with the industry because I noticed that there was a gap in content that was focused on pretext development. And so when I created the Fishy Little Liars talk, it was because when I was trying desperately to study how to create pretexts, I couldn't find any books that really went into much depth on the topic. I couldn't find conference talks that focused on how to create it, like how to manufacture a pretext. Um, so I took my process and I put together a talk. And so my first talk I presented at B-Side San Francisco, and I struggled. I struggled a lot because the slides they insisted I provide in a Google slide format, I think it was on a Chromebook. And it was like I only had one screen and it was like the slideshow. I had no presenter notes. There was no clock. I didn't wear a watch. I was like, this is the worst. And so I ended up rushing through like a 25-minute presentation in something like 13 minutes because I was afraid I would run out of time. And then I realized like I was so far ahead of the end that I was just like, panic. And so I ended up throwing it to questions. You can watch all of this on YouTube and watch me like freak out. Like I think I masked it okay, but it's not great. I also made all my slides orange, so I turned the entire audience orange because it was huge on this IMAX screen. So I was like, okay, lots of lessons learned here. So I presented it another like 85 times because of course this was like the very beginning of like the end of the world era. And so I luckily had an opportunity to present it another 85 times virtually, and kind of improve that presentation and add a lot more to it. So There's many versions you can go look up. But essentially it gave me a way to practice that public speaking and then get the timing right, get the slide template right. I had one of my coworkers who was a much more experienced gentleman. He told me from his days in a very large corporate organization that he was taught that you should have for an executive presentation no more than 7 slides, no more than 7 bullets per slide, and no more than 7 words per bullet. And that's just like at an executive C-suite level presentation, like a, board update or something like that. And I try to keep that in mind. Like, I'm not going to only have 7 slides, obviously, for like a
I'm
conference
actually
talk, but
writing it
like,
down.
but like try to keep the words to a minimum
Yeah.
and try to let your narrative tell the story. Your slide is just to keep people from uncomfortably staring at your face. But try to, use your words to illustrate your point. Don't read off your slides. Like there's a lot of really great content on the internet about how to become a better presenter. And so I really try to dig into that and learn about how to become a better storyteller and how to reduce my nerves. You'll notice now I start my talks with a cold open. I start with a story, and it's more for me than it is for the audience because it helps me kind of get that comfort on stage. Whereas if I start with just, here's the title slide, here's who I am, here's, what we're talking about, like you can hear the nerves in my voice in a lot of my presentations where I start that way. Whereas if I start with a story and I kind of get a couple laughs and people start to get engaged, like it reduces my anxiety quite a bit. So yeah, there's, practice really helps, but public speaking used to be one of those things that gave me like infinite volumes of anxiety. I was the kid who, when they went around the class and were like, okay, you're going to read the next paragraph and we're just going to go next student, next student, next student. I'd like count which one was mine and then read that paragraph 18 times and not be listening to what everybody else was reading at all because I was so nervous about what I had to read. So I didn't absorb anything. So public speaking actually helped a lot because it gave me a lot more confidence and just comfort with, speaking and presenting in general. And the SECTF, competing in the social engineering capture the flag, being put on a stage in a soundproof booth and making phone calls where I had to achieve an objective in front of an audience of like 1,000 people who are, I mean, let's face it, hackers are hypercritical, hyper negative, stereotypically type people. It's our job to point out all the mistakes people are
Yeah.
making.
Yeah.
And so suffering through that judgment was something that also helped kind of cure me of my anxiety for public speaking as well.
And I don't think a lot of people also realize this. Public speaking is a science and it's an art unto itself. There's
Hmm.
so many factors that play into it. And like you'd said, people can tell when you're nervous, when you're like in your voice,
Yeah,
they can hear and they can make those comments and they can say, oh, okay, so nervous. Maybe they don't,
know what they're
or
talking
it
about.
kind of
Yeah.
undermines your authority, your mastery of the subject as well. And I used to be something similar to that when I first started teaching. I didn't have a lot of experience with, talking to a room full of students. And I was a grad assistant at the time when I started teaching. So it kind of helped me that I wasn't the full-time faculty
Hmm.
member. So I slowly kind of got used to it. And over time, I now know that I am skilled enough that I can command the audience, at least a room
Hmm.
of 50 students. I can tell, I can talk about the material. And even doing the cyber conversations, actually, it has kind of helped me a lot. I never thought I would be the one to do the question and answer section. When we came up with this idea, I'd always assumed one of my, more accomplished coworkers, she
Hmm.
would be the one to do that. But she goes, no, I'm going to do the introduction and you are going to do the Q&A. And at the beginning, the conversations were live. I didn't
Hmm.
have time to prep my questions in advance because they were asked by the audiences, and I had to make sure I was moderating the session well. So it kind of took a little bit of skill, a little bit of trial and error. But once I figured out that I can do this job well, it kind of stuck, like lessons
Yeah.
learned and everything.
Yeah. No, it does help. I think the repetition helps too. And with live presentations, it's always kind of rocky. Like nothing tends to go smoothly in my experience.
Yeah. And like you said, we cybersecurity, we're a bunch of like, I don't know what to say, but we are negative. Like you had said, we try to think
Pessimists.
of the things exactly. We're
Yeah.
pessimists. We try to think of what could go wrong so we can be prepared for that
Right.
eventuality. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of people are like, why are you being so negative? Not being realistic.
No, I'm being realistic. Yeah, I try to say like I'm just a realist.
Yeah.
Like I want to be prepared for the worst just in case. Like I'm not trying to be hyper negative, but also
Yeah.
I don't want to, underestimate what could happen here.
Yeah. So we are actually way out of time. So I'm going to wrap
Yeah.
up this session with one last question. What is one piece of advice that you have for the young people that are watching this video?
Oh, I would say absolutely do not neglect your friendships and your human networks while you go through school and early in your career, because those relationships and those professional alliances that you create, especially early on in your career, are going to help to create the opportunities and open the doors to future career paths and keep your options open, because the job that you may be doing in 20 years may not yet exist. So try to learn all the skills that you can, keep your mind open, target something that sounds interesting now, sure. If red team or blue team sounds like more of interest to you, great. But acquire all the skills, keep your mind open about future opportunities, keep your network healthy, foster good relationships, and know that the job that you may be doing in 20 years might not exist yet.
That is a wonderful piece of advice. Once again, thank you so much for being a guest on Cyber Conversations, and thank you to the audience for watching us.